All right, everybody, welcome back to Road to Retirement. Tony Marlette Jr. here at Brookside Tax and Financial with our friend Tony Shore out in Minneapolis. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Anthony or Tony. We're both Tonys.
Anthony would be fine, or whatever.
Yeah, good morning, Tony. It's great to be here with you. You can never have too many Tonys, as I
I
always say.
know we do always say that.
And our fearless leader, Chris, is he's off gallivanting, doing a little traveling before tax season hits, and he gets really busy, right?
Yes, he is. He was in Vegas last week, as you know, obviously, or
At a big financial conference.
couple of weeks ago. Yeah, at a
Yeah.
financial conference. You guys ran into each other, and yeah, he headed out to Florida to golf. I understand he's a good golfer. I always, when people are golfing, I always just kind of default to they're attempting to golf. But I heard Chris is a pretty good golfer.
I've heard he's a really good golfer.
Yeah,
He's a scratch golfer. He knows what he's doing.
yeah.
He's a good one. That's what I've heard as well. But I don't golf either, so I've tried, and I really want. I would like to golf, and I think I enjoy it. I like going out to the driving range, but I'm so bad.
Yeah.
I slice the right every time, and either you have the time and money to spend and to golf and you golf all the time, or you don't golf. I mean, it's not something you can just do once a year.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I like going just for the aspect of being outside, taking advantage of the nice weather when you can, driving around in the golf cart, golfing a few holes in the morning
Yeah.
and or even at night before it gets too dark. But yeah, it is really you gotta kind of be all in or all out on it.
Yeah, you kind of do. I would agree with that. And speaking about all in, talking about that, our topic today, you said you wanted to talk about inflation. Uh-oh. Hot
Yeah,
topic.
this is a rough one. We talk a lot about inflation on our shows and my
Sure.
market updates and basically every meeting I have with clients and we have with our clients here. And you talk to
I bet.
advisors across the country on a weekly basis. I'm positive they do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
But what what I want to get into is just kind of looking at how we got here. So I think for a lot of people, they know these things, and myself included, like you know how these things happen, but you apply some context to it and you can actually see it working. You can actually see things the way that you read about it or the way that people tell you to interpret the data. So I want to take a look back here, and I mentioned to you yesterday, this one might be a little hairy. Neither you or I are obviously political pundits, and we're not looking for jobs on CNN or Fox News or anything.
No.
But when you talk about inflation, you have to talk about the economy. We talk about COVID, and when any of those things come in, there is going to be a political piece of this that's gonna collide.
Well,
We're gonna,
sure. I mean,
yeah,
it involves the government, that's for sure. And they get involved in our economy, obviously. The U.S. economy and the U.S. government go hand in hand, and therefore politics enters into it. I thought the first topic, when you said we're talking about inflation, I assumed we would spend the entire show talking about the price of eggs, because that seems to be a hot topic.
it's such a hot topic that wasn't there an investigation launched
Yes.
into the price of eggs of all things?
Speaking of government, yeah, Congress. They say they're do nothing Congress, but boy, they're going to look into those egg
Oh yeah,
prices,
they are. Oh man.
and they're going to investigate Ticketmaster.
Oh
So
right, yeah. Thank you, Taylor Swift. Right. That's amazing how much pull some people have.
yeah, it is interesting. So, but yeah, obviously, people need to understand it because it's really affecting people's finances, especially if people are planning for retirement or in retirement. Right?
Absolutely,
Inflation is a
absolutely.
big deal. So, but you're saying it can get political.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're going to go back to, this does cross two administrations. It crosses the Trump administration into the Biden administration.
Yep.
So we're actually going to talk about going back briefly a little bit further than that. Again, this is not a history lesson or political analysis in any way, but just want to take some time to go over some things. And before we do that, obviously, if you like anything you hear today, or if you hate anything you hear today, you want to let us know about it, do so. You can give us a call. We'll flash the number on the website again. And remember to Subscribe, like, comment on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well. It's youtube.com Brookside Financial and Facebook/Brookside Tax. And then 440-886-3550 as always. So if we look back to inflation, really we need to look back to, it seems like so long ago, but really let's go back not even 3 years ago to 2020. And we had the whole economy, the whole entire economy of the largest economy in the world was shut down due to the COVID-19 outbreak.
Yep.
There's the infamous phrase that we heard over and over again. It's just 2 weeks, to flatten the curve, right? So we're going to shut everything down. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to ramp everything right back up. And it's going to be like nothing ever happened. We talked about the political aspects of this. Donald Trump obviously was president at the time. He was taking advice from the CDC, Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, these people that are medical people, unelected, that didn't have really any say over the economic impacts of things. So we went ahead with this shutdown. And the assumption that was out there was that you cannot have concern for both the economy and for public health at the same time. And I think that really ended up being a really big mistake, a really bad assumption.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it is a hard line to walk, and they tried to, if you try to walk the line or err on one side or the other, it's it really wreaked havoc with the economy. I mean, that is why we're where we're at, and I think you've pinpointed the starting point right there to our current woes. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody, just as a refresher, everybody that is going to be listening, everybody that we talk to, obviously is going to remember this. We had the stay-at-home orders, the quarantines. These things were relatively unprecedented, and really not even necessarily talking about the work-from-home people, but the people that flat out lost their jobs, that weren't working anymore. So no bars, no gyms, no restaurants, no coffee shops, no concert venues, no movie theaters. A lot of people were not working. As a result of this,
the whole tourism industry and travel industry.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great one. Planes, airlines, things that are staples of an economy were shut down. By the time it was all said and done, the government had spent $6 trillion as basically a substitute for working people's paychecks.
Yeah.
So we ran the national debt all the way up to 121% of GDP, or gross domestic product.
Wow.
Just for context, back in the early 80s, we had the national debt was 35% of GDP. And then President Ronald Reagan called that an emergency. 35% of GDP in the national debt was considered an emergency. And we're now sitting around 121%.
Oh, yeah, that's not good. You're not painting a pretty picture this morning, Tony.
I hate to say it, but we're not. This is this was a lot of government intervention where it was kind of self-inflicted for the most part. And it's not to say none of this, by the way, is to infer in any way, shape, or form that COVID-19 wasn't real, that it wasn't serious, that people didn't get sick and die. They did. It was real. It was contagious. I had it. I believe I had it. I know I had it at least once. I know many people that did. But again, the prevailing thought was that you can't have both concern for public health and the economy. So that's kind of when the government intervention kicked in.
Yeah. 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 It's hard to have both. And then they shut down the economy. And then, of course, what did they do? They spent billions.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, they did that. You're exactly right. Brings us to our next point about, trillions. Bond buying it increases the money supply. So the government went out, they bought bonds, and obviously, if nobody's working and everything's shut down, spending at this point has plummeted. And we entered a place of deflation, which is the opposite of inflation, where prices go down. So once this deflation occurs, spending picks back up. At some point, spending is going to pick back up, and we have nowhere to go from there but shoot straight through the roof, which is part of how we see ourselves where we're at right now.
Yep, exactly. So that's, I notice on the banner you have free money is expensive.
Oh, is it ever? So if we forward to March of 2021 now, we still have low inflation, real income, and that's income in terms of gross household income as it relates to inflation, is really at an all-time high. It's about 4.2 trillion. That number is hard to contextualize, but it's really at an all-time high. And in March of 21, we sent out another round of stimulus checks. Now, there was an original round of stimulus checks that went out in 2020. Another one came out in March of 2021. And what this did, it started to affect the personal savings rate. So the savings rate is basically a rate of money that people have in savings as a percentage of their gross income. So our savings rate during this time when nobody's really going out and doing anything, and people aren't spending money, but they're basically saving money and getting money, raises from 9% all the way up to 33%.
Oh,
so
wow.
The savings rate practically quadruples. Nobody's really spending anything at first. And then once we get the hang of this stay at home, work at home type thing, we start to spend money on, the online stuff, Pelotons, workout from home, Netflix, things like this to stay home.
Home improvement projects just went through the roof during that time.
You're absolutely right. So it's more, like you said, home-centric type of things. And then later on, by the time we got to the end of 2020, we were looking at a savings rate that was back down to around 13%. So I think I said 2021 before I meant 2020. So
Sure.
You start off at 9% savings rate, go up to 33%. And then once everybody gets the hang of this and they're buying and staying at home, savings rate plummets all the way back down to 13%. So the new presidential administration, the Biden administration that comes into office at that point, what do? They send more stimulus money out. So they spend more money. And then the savings rate almost doubles from there again. So we're kind of going back and forth. Everybody's getting used to this, stay at home thing. You send out more money. And the title on the bottom, the free money being expensive. If you look at $1 in January of 2020, right now it's only worth 87 cents. And that's only over about 3 years.
Wow. So, it's the picture doesn't get any rosier as you continue here, Tony. I mean,
yeah, well, and I mean, frankly, I think a lot of people thought that, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks, which ended up
or even
being
2 months. I mean,
ridiculous.
at one point it's like, okay, next month we're going to kick back in, or in 2 months we're going to kick back in. But it ended up being over a year.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And honestly, for the most part, yeah, it was. And I mean, I think in some cases, maybe even longer than that.
Our office where I go into the studio, I worked from home for over a year. Our office was closed for over a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's weird not setting foot in your office and seeing your office desk and your stuff there. For when I went back the first time, it was weird because it's like, wow, I used to come here every single day, almost 5 days a week at least.
Right.
And now I'm walking in for the first time in a year and a half or a year. It was insane.
It really was. And I mean, there was a lot of fear that was being driven as ordinary people. People like me and you, didn't really know what to expect. We were going based off of what we were hearing. I remember my wife and I doing online grocery shopping, going to pick up our groceries, and then rubbing each item down with sanitizer, like the
I
disease was
know.
living on a box of cereal or something. It really was
Crazy.
just strange times. And then, of
Yeah.
course, lockdowns end, factories get back up and going again, but in no way, shape, or form are they equipped to deal with the surge, which is why we saw supply chain shortages
Yeah.
that were really still going on, really, and short
That's a
staff.
huge part of the inflation problem.
Absolutely.
I would assume, right? Didn't that cause inflation as well? All the supply chain issues. I mean, we're still seeing supply chain issues created by the COVID fiasco.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. And even now with people getting back to work, there's obviously staffing shortages everywhere.
Oh, everywhere.
And I still think it's not necessarily, it might be, people don't want to work. You had some retirements with people with COVID, and frankly, you did have some people that are afraid to go back to work. But I think also that the demand was so pent up that the old workforce was just not in any way, shape, or form able to overcompensate for it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, everybody, that's another question we could spend a whole other show about. Is this is the problem with people can't find enough work? There are not enough employees. And everybody said, I don't get it. Before COVID, we didn't have this problem, or we had a problem in certain areas like healthcare, but it wasn't nearly as bad. But over the years, and I think it even started before COVID, but especially after COVID, all of a sudden there's not enough people for the jobs, even the existing jobs. And I've heard a lot of theories, and you're right. After COVID, a lot of people, maybe if they were on the cusp or could swing it, said, forget it, I'm going to retire early, or I'm
Absolutely.
retiring, right, instead of going back to work. So that's a few. But I've heard another theory also that contributes to some of it, not all, is that let's say you have somebody out there who is working 3 different jobs. Maybe they have a main job, but they have a couple side hustles, or to make extra money, the single mom is waitressing at one job and she's an assistant teacher during the day at another, and then she does another job. Well, a lot of those people after COVID, they were sitting around at home, they're like, forget it, I'm not going, I'll just stick to this one job. And so they didn't pick up the second job. So it's really those, especially in the secondary job market. I mean, it's across the board, but that's the area that gets hit the hardest, are restaurants and things like that.
Without a doubt, yeah, and a lot of our unemployment numbers that we're seeing now, they don't look bad, but a lot of these are people that are coming back to work that are filling their old roles. So
Right.
I swear, in the numbers, numbers are great, they're factual, but in some ways, you got to kind of take a little bit of a deeper look
You have to put them
sometimes.
in context. You have to
Absolutely, yeah,
contextualize
exactly.
it. And you're right. I mean, people going back to work and filling their old jobs are, if you look at the employment numbers, that's, the politicians are like, look at U.S. unemployment is, it's so low. That's great. We don't have any unemployment. Well, yeah, but the problem is we don't have any workers for jobs.
Well,
That's the problem.
yeah. And I mean, I just this morning, and I think we've talked about it before, we're starting to see big companies, a lot of tech companies, obviously, but other companies too, starting to lay off more people just to help improve their bottom line. Because I think with everything that's gone on, they're starting to see that more more of this, it deserves a deeper look. You're not quite having the company's profits have been great, but is it sustainable? And I think they're starting to see market going down, housing market going down, interest rates going up, government tightening. They could have more rate hikes this year. Um, these companies are looking at a bottom line and saying we need to cut costs, and part of that is cutting the workforce, which
Yeah.
ironically and unfortunately does help bring down inflation. Nobody wants it. You don't want to see people laid off, but ultimately that's part of the part of what the Fed is going for here too.
Yeah. They continue to raise interest rates, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And then part of inflation, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, the Russia war on Ukraine, the Russia invasion of Ukraine happened about a year ago, last February. I think inflation was well on its way at that point, but that did have something to do with energy. Energy is up more than anything, 40, 41, 42% over that time frame. So I think with Russian imports, that certainly added to it. But that was a smaller piece of the inflation puzzle. It certainly wasn't the only reason, or even close to being the biggest reason. But I
Right.
think that at least deserves a mention.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, obviously the war in Ukraine really affected a lot of things. Again, the supply chain issue, and especially for Europe, but also for us. And then Russian energy exports that affected the world globally as well, and our economy and inflation here. Like you said, I mean, over 40% increase in energy costs. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I think we started off, you mentioned about the such a positive tone that this podcast has.
Oh yeah,
But
it's
the
nothing but happy news today for the kids, right?
the International Monetary Fund, the IMF,
Oh boy,
their
here we
October
go.
2012, like, it's not that bad, not that bad. Their October outlook, as of October of last year, projected that there's more. It's going to get worse before it gets better before the end of 2023. But their projection is that we'll be around 4.7% inflation by the end of
Wow,
23. Now, that's
that would be
still
great.
that would be great compared to where we're at right now. That's still double our historic average. So there's a lot more work to be done.
Yeah.
Some people expect it to get worse before it gets better. The market the market has been ahead of the economy a little bit. So if that's any case, if that's any indicator, there's no getting away from it,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, from what they say, I mean, the outlook eventually is positive, but again, they say, 2022 was rough, but 2023 is also might be rough. We might have to weather more of the storm, but there is a light on the horizon, they say. You
Yeah,
know, there is
yeah,
an end in sight, I guess.
absolutely. And we talk, this really, if there's one thing to be taken from this, it's that government actions have consequences. When you spend that
Right.
much money, put that much money, our national debt right now is 33 trillion. 6 trillion of that has been in the last 3 years. So that's almost 20% in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't do that and expect to not have inflation issues and economic issues, and coming on the heels of a government shutdown. So,
That's another one. I mean, and then the debt ceiling. We have this affects the debt ceiling a little bit, a lot actually. So I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think once you can contextualize some of this, it starts to make sense. It's not just headlines on the news. It's not
right,
just tickers across the bottom line. Like, this has a place, and I mean, I heard the stat last year, which was amazing, that the last four presidential administrations. So you have two Democrats, two Republicans. You have Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. Those administrations combined have outspent every previous administration combined in history, even when you account for the price index changes. So 22, 23 years of spending across four different administrations has outspent every previous administration. And that's part of why that's a big part of why we're seeing what we're seeing.
well, sure, obviously spending is how we get here, right?
Absolutely.
You kind of answered that question today. Well, this has been great. Is there anything else you want to add before we go today?
No, just talk to your financial professional. These topics, we call the podcast "Road to Retirement." These are all just pieces. Like you said before, inflation is a big thing for retirees. The good thing is Social Security's keeping up. You're not really getting a raise, but it's at least keeping up. If retirees are out there and they're listening, they need to think of how you can create a portfolio to best weather the effects of inflation. So
Right.
talk to your advisor. If you want a second opinion, you talk to us. I flashed our website and our phone number on the screen again, 440-886-3550. You can visit us online. Check out our videos on our YouTube page and our Facebook channel as well. We have all sorts of content. And again, we do the full range of financial services. We don't just tell you to, hey, we'll take your retirement account, go see somebody else about your estate plan or your taxes or whatever. We can handle it all.
Yeah, because it all ties together. I mean, your retirement income plan, your investments, your estate plans, your healthcare, Medicare, estate planning, taxes. You have to look at the big picture, and that's what you guys do. And you also specialize in each of those areas and have people that are qualified there. Chris himself is not only he's an estate planning attorney and a licensed tax professional. So
yeah, he's the Swiss Army knife.
He's the Swiss Army knife. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we were at that conference with some of the top advisors from all across the country met at this financial conference. And here's Chris. And really, he's one of the only ones there out of the hundreds I talked to that actually has worked in all these areas and can specialize in these areas and not lose focus. He's a pretty sharp guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty impressive. And you guys do good work there. Not to belittle what you do. You're impressive.
I was going to say, sharp people hire other sharp people too. So
yeah, that's good. So, well, great show today. And again, that number for our listeners, 440-886-3550. If you want to get a plan in place that will deal with future inflation, so you don't have to worry about it, that deals with making sure your investments are correct, your estate plan is good, pick up the phone and give Brookside a call, give Tony a call. Tony, great show today. Listeners, that does it for today's episode of The Road to Retirement with our host today, Tony Marlette.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tony.